gente, sé como to subscribe to Cafecito Break, to tell your familia que nosotros estamos aquí presentes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cafecito Break. I'm your host, Rosangel Pérez. Today is Thursday, October 9th, 2025, and the intention of today is to restream the Mayoral Forum that was hosted by Crain's Business in New York City, featuring Curtis Sliwa, who is a Republican candidate for mayor, Andrew Cuomo, who was our former governor, who is now running as an independent, and Zohran Mamdani, who is a Democratic Socialist for New York City. Pues está bien. So wanted to, before we get into it, and why I made a decision that I wanted to share this feed is because yesterday, after I experienced the whole forum and listened to all of the speakers and saw the way the audience, through the audience, they had opportunity to submit some questions, and some of those questions were picked, and there were two people who were moderating this conversation, and they each had an opportunity to speak to each of the candidates separately. So this was not a debate. It was just an opportunity for the small business community to get to hear these candidates. Anyway, I was grateful to be there. So shout out and thank you to Jimmy Wagner, who invited Cafecito Break to be present and witness this. And before I begin, I'd like to offer my initial commentary and that I shared yesterday on the feed. So take a listen. I need to activate that. So I'm going to remove this over here and make this bigger. And let's see if you can hear the commentary. Before you get a chance to listen, I just want to say that thank you for the community who tunes in to Cafecito Break. It's been super crazy. We've been completely focused on the New York City election cycle because we know that a lot of New Yorkers are concerned about the election season. They're concerned about the mayor's race. They don't feel like they're getting enough information from mainstream media, which is one of the goals that Cafecito Break tries to fill. Even though it's really difficult for us because we live in this shadow ban, cancel culture space. So one of the ways that you can be helpful to us and in service of New Yorkers as we try our best to interview candidates here at Cafecito Break to show them to you as a, hey, there's other options here. And some of the reasons you're not aware of other options is because mainstream media isn't really covering what the other options are. So it is my attempt here to present to you some of those other options. And I'll start by being candid. I don't think that as Cafecito Break and the Pérez sisters, I don't think we've ever supported a candidate the way we have supported Curtis Sliwa. And in fact, we really don't love to we don't really like to blend the endorsement with our platform. We don't like it, but times is of the essence. It is time to rise to the occasion. It is time to share things that make the heart shudder. In New York City, there is great opposition to even hearing the common sense Republican, because the word Republican has been tainted with Donald Trump, has been tainted with the red hat, has been tainted with other things that come with, they're supremacists, they're racist, etc., etc. My point here, and why I'm also doing this, is get to know us. There's naughty apples everywhere, but there are a lot of common sense, moderate thinking people who are not even Republican. They're conservative, they're independent, they're Democrats, who want a different choice than Andrew Cuomo, who already had his opportunity to serve New York, and I don't think we liked the results. I don't think New York liked the results because did you see? Let me remind you what happened with the Democratic primary. Who won when it was between Adams and Zohran and Andrew Cuomo? It was Zohran. It was so bad that Andrew Cuomo left to run as an independent. So, okay, here is my 2 cents. Let me activate this, and this is on the New York Freedom Fighters space on Instagram. I just attended the Crain's Mayoral Forum business breakfast, and New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani was present. Andrew Cuomo, who was our former disgraced governor, was present, and so is the Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa present. Whomever was in that room, I don't know if anything was clarified. I think that people are still confused over whom to vote for. Within that sea of confusion, I will say that this woman right here is still very clear. My choice, I tripled, I quadrupled, I'm gonna 10 toes down it, is Curtis Sliwa for mayor. I believe that he is the most sane choice for New York City at this time. So there is a lot of money in interests representing certain candidates. Then there's the socialism aspect, and then there's the working class people of New York City that many of us feel left behind. I think for the benefit of New York City, we need somebody who's kind of more in the middle. Curtis Sliwa for mayor. Why go with someone with no experience, and why go with the other who already lost against Mamdani and has disgraced New York? And not to mention, I could never forgive him for what he did and his policies, what and how many deaths they contributed to during the nursing home scandal. All of the nightmares that we as New Yorkers are witnessing as repercussions to some of the decisions that leadership has made. And my last note to folks is we really need to be better at reading the room and communicating with community members. Not everyone is a Democrat. Not everyone is a socialist. Not everyone is progressive. Some of us are conservative and independent thinkers. So whoever does win, I really pray and hope that you do absolutely represent all of New York City. This is Rosangel of Capacity Break. I'd like to know what you're thinking, and if you are decided on who you're going to vote for in this upcoming election. I will say this, across the board, people are a little nervous about this election. And so whomever wins, I think that we just also need to continue to be engaged community, people who love New York and love her people. Bye, guys. I just attended the Crain's Mayoral Forum. Okay. So that was my initial insight. And what started to happen is that people were commenting right away, right? So it tells me, I from all of the time that I've been using social media, you could just tell right away when the public is itching to comment on a topic. Like when the Bad Bunny situation was happening, everyone wanted to share their perspectives. And this is kind of like a hole that I wish people who are in media, in journalism, whether it's print or video, there is a silent, I don't want to know, I don't know if they're a majority, but they could be, because I really believe that more New Yorkers are middle ground common sense, but the politics of New York City and the democratic stronghold that exists And not only that, but this kind of takeover of democratic socialism. Like, people are afraid of Mamdani. Oh my God, we can't let a democratic socialist be mayor. Guys, we have a lot of democratic socialism already existing in New York City. Things that are crushing our economy, decisions that were made by the leadership in in collaboration with people like the New York City Council. Not all, but we as New Yorkers who work hard and have entrusted these people to make good decisions with our money. Are they making good decisions with our money? Are we going to vote for Zohran because he's saying good things, because he's promising apple in the sky promises that are not rooted in reality? I'm a crossover from MTV Networks, and my job at MTV was writing multi-million-dollar show production budgets. Most of these candidates who are running for office or in office, do they have budget 101 experience? Shouldn't that even be a thing? Isn't it a thing? I don't know. Someone please correct me. Do politicians or people in leadership, are they required to learn budget 101? And if that isn't part of it, why not? Why not? Because it's really important to me, and it would be puzzling to me if you are making decisions with money that's not yours. What are you funding? Where is our money going to? Where has our money gone to? It hasn't gone to New York. And as I've been further contemplating just the whole New York City election cycle, I get even more angry. I get very angry because of the hard reality that New Yorkers are still being left behind. They want to convince us that Andrew Cuomo is the best choice. How is that? How is that possible? I feel like we're living in an upside down world. But then my question is, who is they? Who is the they? They keep mentioning these polls. Are polls right all of the time? They haven't been right all of the time. But before I play today's Crain's Mayoral Forum replay, I'd like to share just perspectives of other New Yorkers who are feeling like these candidates on the Democratic side, Zohran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo, do not speak to them.
Only parodies Sliwa! Only parodies Sliwa! Only parodies Sliwa! Only parodies Sliwa!
Today's Democratic Party is not recognizable at all. Totally not. And it's disastrous to see how far they have fallen.
Okay, let me see if I could. Let me see if this is. Stand by. I am trying to bring up a clip. Okay, I'm going to share some more media in a second. Let me see where it is. Stand by, guys. This is when you do something live. Okay, so we even have the naked cowboy of Times Square who is saying Curtis Sliwa for mayor. And let me share that with you right now. Go, da, 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 da. Hold on a second. I'm going to add it to the scene. And here we go. The naked cowboy has been in Times Square for over 25 years, Imagine all the stories he has just from his center point of Times Square and seeing all the changes. So I think that his insight from just being boots on the ground, entertainer, host, and also somebody who is, is building his legacy.
Curtis Sliwa for mayor of NYC. Mamdani's just a left-wing lunatic like AOC. Curtis stands with law enforcement. He'll be tough on crime. Mamdani supported no cash bail, sides with criminals all the time. Curtis respects hard work and responsibility. Mamdani is a socialist and thinks everything is free. Curtis knows that tax the rich chases tax dollars away. Mamdani, like most Democrats, ignores urban decay. We're finally done with Adams, another Democrat mistake. The last thing we need is a radical progressive from the Islamic State. Curtis Sliwa for mayor of NYC. Mamdani's just a left-wing lunatic like AOC. And you know it. Curtis Sliwa for mayor.
That's right, Curtis Sliwa for mayor. Rudy Giuliani endorsed Curtis Sliwa recently.
It's so obvious that you're the better choice. I told you this when we talked the other day. I've had an incredible amount of pressure from Republicans to support Andrew Cuomo. And I'll explain to you, whether we win or lose, we got to go down fighting for what we believe in, yes. not like a bunch of little whores, you know?
Oh, goodness. I just love New Yorkers. So, yeah, this is 45 gallons of radioactive water to be dumped into the Hudson River from Indian Point. Oh, my goodness gracious. Here is Scott Lobato, who is a Staten Island-based patriot activist artist.
Cuomo, the guy who shut this fucking bar down, he shut every mom and pop business down.
Damn straight.
But across the street, Costco and Home Depot are allowed to stay open.
Tell it.
And they fired every New York employee from sanitation, teachers, healthcare, MTA, you name it. You're fired if you don't get the poison. That's Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah.
Have we forgotten?
No!
So all of you people in this room right now, remember, I'm not here to make friends, and I'm not politically correct. There are more fucking balls in this room right now than the whole fucking city. Every person in this room right now, I don't care if you just moved here yesterday. You are a fucking New Yorker.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's how we win. New York was respected by the whole fucking world. People looked up to us. We're not like mean or, we're just New Yorkers with thick skin. We don't take shit from anybody. We'll give you the shirt off our back. But don't fuck with my community. That's a New Yorker. And I'm hearing people, friends of mine, family members. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Curtis can't win. They don't look yet. We're going to go for Cuomo. And I go right up to them. I don't care how big they are. That guy right there, twice my size, that guy will kill me. If he said he's from Cuomo, I'll call him a fucking pussy. I swear to God, man. And that's what I want you people to do. Because everybody here knows somebody. Well, we can't let that guy win, so we got to vote for the Cuomo guy. No, you go up to them and you say, stop being a pussy. Put your balls on and be a New Yorker. There's one man, only one man, who's going to save this city forever. And I'm not just saying that because it's true. Cuomo is kicking the can down the road. Cuomo created Mamdani. Adams created Mamdani. They allowed his cult followers of socialists to be violent and destroy and purge. And that's what happens. The revolving doors of justice. That's why it grew. That's how Mamdani got created. Because of Cuomo. So anybody who votes for Cuomo, you're kicking the can down the road. In 2 years, there's going to be 10 Mamdanis. In 5 years, there's going to be 30 Mamdanis.
And more next now.
Listen, and one more thing. Experience. When people say that Curtis doesn't have experience, he doesn't have experience to be the mayor. He's never been the mayor before. You know me, I've been saying this for a month. The President of the United States did not have experience to be the President of the United States before he was President. The governor did not have experience to be the governor before he was governor. Nor mayors, nor the CEO of a company is not the CEO before he became the CEO. That's right. It is something that you acquire and learn to be. And there's nobody in this city, nobody, not me, a fourth generation New Yorker, nobody, no man or woman, from the beginning of New York City has more knowledge and experience of this fucking city than Curtis Sliwa. Period. Thank you.
Some more time.
Cuomo, the guy who shut.
This is to all the conservative influencers who don't know shit about New York. I need you all to shut the fuck up, please, okay? They're out there right now telling people that you should vote for Grandma Killer Cuomo because Adams dropped out and Cuomo has a better chance to win than Sliwa. You have no clue what the hell you're talking about, okay? All you're doing is making it harder for Curtis Sliwa to win, okay? There's people like me and local candidates over the last 5 years that have been red-pilling people in the hood so that they could vote Republican, and now all of you are fucking that up by trying to make it split the vote between Curtis Sliwa and Cuomo. Mamdani and Cuomo are going to split the Democratic vote. Adams dropping out makes it harder for Sliwa, but it's still not impossible. Sliwa got almost 30% 4 years ago. A lot of red pills have been slinged since then. He could get 35% and theoretically win with 35%. 35% means 65% remaining. Divide that in half, that's 32.5% each between Cuomo and Mamdani. Now, I know it's not going to be an even split. Maybe Curtis Sliwa needs to get up to 40% to win, but it's definitely possible. And you guys telling Cuomo to vote for Cuomo is just making it harder for Curtis Sliwa to win. He's out there in Brownsville. He's out there in the Bronx. He's out there in all these neighborhoods working his fucking ass off for you stupid influencers to go and tell these Republican voters in New York to go and vote for fucking Cuomo. You all need to shut up. And I'm sorry I'm cursing a lot, but really, you guys need to shut the fuck up. You don't know New York City politics. This is not Georgia where there's a runoff election. Curtis Sliwa does not need 50% to win. Okay, he does not need 51%. He could win with 35. He could win with 40. But we need to be all hands on deck. He got 28% with a conservative candidate taking some of the votes away. Okay, he will get 35 to 40%, and he can win with that if everyone goes and votes for him. I've had people DM me and ask me, I don't know what to do. Should I vote for Cuomo? No, do not vote for Cuomo. End of story, okay? Sliwa all the way. Keep your mouth shut if you know nothing about New York.
Listen,
and that's
these
it.
people, this is what I'm going to say, man.
This is to all the conservative.
All right, so one more video before I share the Crain's Mayoral Forum replay that was streamed on Fox News. And this is from Curtis Sliwa himself.
And look at the mess they've gotten us into that has led to the rise of somebody that nobody knew a year ago, Zohran Mamdani. The reason is Zohran Mamdani is because of the Democratic Party. They didn't fight their own battles. They turned their party over to the socialists. And now they want to come to us. Dormanu, they want to say, oh, you're a Republican? We need your help. You can't possibly win. So help us because we're falling and we can't get up.
So pathetic!
They can't even stand and defend their own party. So they want now you Republicans to become rent-a-wreck Democrats, Hessians, mercenaries, to help Andy Cuomo.
No way.
Who didn't even campaign in the primary. No.
That's true. No. All right, mi gente. Take a listen, grab your cafecito, grab your tea. Because you asked for this, where can I listen to this? This was streamed by Fox. I think it's on one channel. I don't know if, and I hope that when I stream it, it'll be stereo, but if for some reason the audio is only on one channel, the stream. But take a listen as you do your chores or maybe watch. And I welcome your commentary. Again, the people in the audience, they're business people. Keep that in mind, please. What I will say as someone who is a crossover from corporate media, MTV, to my own independent platform, and for like 13 years now, that the two candidates, Zohran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo, do not speak to working class people. They're speaking to socialist progressive people, and they're also speaking to big money, big influencers. A lot of working class people are feeling left behind, and working class people are in every party. They are in every kind of body, man, woman, young, old. It doesn't matter, I think, for this race, for you to be looking at who's the R, who's the D, who's the I. Who is a reflection of New York? It's so easy to look at Curtis, as I've seen in some of the comments, oh, I'm not going to vote for another white guy. So you're going to vote for someone who is cosplaying that he's boots on the ground, that has no experience, enough work experience. He is very articulate. He's charming. He's easy on the eyes, right? That's what a lot of the people are saying, both men and women. And that is wonderful because he can work this crowd. But he doesn't fool real New Yorkers. People like us see through his smile, through the cynicism. And as I was there witnessing Zohran Mamdani's responses, I just heard a whole lot of word salads. Very articulate, very polished. As I listened to Andrew Cuomo, I felt like I was listening to someone who already had his time with New York. Your season is over, Andrew Cuomo. Reflect on your actions, and we still have not yet heard you own up to your part of what disaster was created through your pushes, through your policies, the nursing home scandal, then writing a book about it. To me, it's like, que bolas that you're walking around like if this didn't fucking happen. And then what angers me even more is the big bolas, the audacity that people have been having to try to strong arm people who are undecided voters, people who are Republicans, and people who are independents. Don't throw away your vote. They're telling us we're very scared that Mamdani will bring in socialism. You must vote for Cuomo. That to me is one of the stupidest type of thinking I've ever heard in my entire life. It's rooted in no common sense. It's rooted in fear. The polls are saying this, the polls are saying that. There's the voter registration. I know that. I know that. Polls have been wrong before. I want to highlight that when you have a machine that is a strong ally like the mainstream media to the Democratic Party, do you think you're going to hear fair perspectives of people like myself who represent most of New York? Most of New Yorkers across the spectrum are more moderate than you believe. And most of us are feeling left behind. And what I will tell you is that I didn't feel like these candidates speak to me. And what I'm hearing, what my sister's hearing from the hundreds of New Yorkers we have spoken to about this, whether on camera, most of them don't want to be on camera. They don't want to be, they tell you they don't even want their name shared because they feel if they speak out against the Democratic Party that they might start losing business, or that they might invite agitators to start protesting at their business or place of business or place of work. Some of them have lost jobs because of this. Zohran invites chaos. I don't think New York needs that. Andrew Cuomo has had his time. Curtis Lee was not perfect, but he is a wise man who loves New York, who has dedicated almost 50 years to New York. And I know we don't have a perfect candidate. I don't think we ever will. But we do have a real New Yorker. And that New Yorker for New York City Mayor is Curtis Sliwa. But that's just my perspective. The choice is yours. Take a listen. Here's the replay.
Mamdani. Mr. Mamdani has represented Astoria, Queens in the New York State Assembly since 2021. He was born in Uganda, raised here in New York, and has focused his work on housing, affordability, and transit issues. Please welcome Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani.
Good morning, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here in this room. And I want to say first, thank you to Crain's for bringing us all together. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my vision for this city. I am looking forward to speaking about the necessity of building a fairer and more affordable city across the 5 boroughs. And I'm excited at the opportunity to do so with many in this room, some of whom I've had the pleasure of meeting prior to today, and some of whom for this is the first time. I know that when many in the business community envisioned their dream candidate for mayor, it may not have been me on this stage. And nevertheless, I am excited at this opportunity because I actually think that there is far more commonality than is often discussed in the visions for this city. You know, many of the questions I've heard are questions of whether the ambition of this agenda outstrips the possibility of this moment, whether it goes beyond what is feasible, whether fiscally or politically. And I think that these are important questions to reckon with, important questions to answer. And I also know that in standing here in front of a room of business leaders, in the business capital of the world, that if anyone knows that success is not inevitable, it is those in this room. And there's a quote that comes to mind from all people, Jeff Bezos, a man whose tax burden I would love to significantly raise. Jeff once said, not to me personally, but in public, you have to be willing to be misunderstood if you're going to innovate. And make no mistake, my friends, when I am mayor, this city is going to innovate. It's a city where we see the term impossible often thrown as a gauntlet at our feet, where you are only as impressive as what you achieved yesterday. And that culture of greatness and the understanding that it has to be relentlessly earned is something that has long animated the private sector. We see it in a finance sector that's the envy of the world. We see it in an arts industry that sets the example for creatives in every time zone. We see it in a tech industry that is increasingly headquartered across every single one of the 5 boroughs. And yet, while there have been moments of incredible achievement, namely the realization of universal pre-K, greatness and this same spirit that I described with the private sector has for far too long eluded us in the public sector. When New Yorkers look to City Hall, they have come to expect indictments, not inspiration. They have come to expect corruption, not competence. And to be clear, this is not simply a reflection of the current administration, but an ethos that has lived for far too long. And what I want to bring to our political arena is an end to the very specific style of exceptionalism we have seen thrive in our politics, where we have told ourselves that that which works elsewhere could never work here. And while it is spoken of in a language of a belief in the unique nature of this city, what it has actually come to represent is a justification for mediocrity, for complacency, for things being as they have always been. And to bring that reinvention to our political arena, to insist upon the same level of excellence from ourselves in the public sector as we do from Broadway stars or whoever's running the court at MSG, it means understanding both the possibility, but also, more importantly, the opportunity in front of us and the responsibility we have to grasp it. I say this knowing that there are an immense number of incredibly gifted public servants in our city who have great ideas and a real love for this city. What they are waiting for, however, is an administration that is looking to harness that potential into the results that New Yorkers have been waiting for. And I think about a Muhammad Ali quote that now we think of more often as an Adidas ad campaign, which I've always loved, which is impossible is nothing. To embody those words, you have to be fearless, you have to be daring, you have to be ambitious to an extent that from the outside may defy logic. And we measure that ambition in an agenda that meets this moment, in an agenda that understands the importance of prioritizing the affordability challenges of the 8.5 million people who call this city home, home that has now become the most expensive city in the United States of America. And what this policy platform is that I have been running on is a reflection of the conversations I've had with New Yorkers across these 5 boroughs. Conversations that have come back to the most pressing costs in these New Yorkers' lives being those of housing, childcare, public transit, groceries. I'm sorry that Con Ed may have cut some of the power. Because I forgot to mention utilities. And oftentimes when I speak about an affordability agenda, it's spoken of as if it is only a reflection of the needs of working class New Yorkers. Yet, however, when I have spoken to business leaders, I have also heard the impact that this lack of affordability is having on the ability to not only start a business here in this city, but to sustain that very business. The ways in which it is demanding businesses pay for the failures of the private sector by having to add premiums in the salaries that are offered, or stipends perhaps for the very kinds of things that city government could be providing, namely childcare. And I know that as I speak, this is a challenging time for the private sector. We added fewer than 1,000 private sector jobs in the first half of this year. 24 tech companies in our city have laid off workers this year, part of a national trend, which has seen 150,000 tech jobs cut across 549 companies just last year alone. And so what I want my policies to do is not only to make it easier for working people to afford this city, but also to ensure that businesses are able to attract the top talent to this city. And I'm eager for the relationship between the public sector and the private sector to be more of a partnership than it ever has before. And I'm particularly eager to find these places of collaboration as we bring a new light to this moment. By understanding that our city can boast of the smartest and most capable talents in the world. And the more that I can bring that expertise that already exists here and that we could have join us here, bring that competence, that expertise from the boardrooms to City Hall, the better our city will be, and the more interconnected our agendas will be. And I also know that part of the reason so many believe in the necessity of significant investment in public goods across the city is the parallel that at times of great investment in those very goods, we can also see an incredible growth within the private sector. And I think often about the 10 years of 2009 to 2019 of how we saw our city able to outstrip the projections that were made and to outstrip the growth that was seen at the state level, at the national level. And part of this is an indication of what we could achieve if we were able to work together and we were able to deliver the relief that New Yorkers need at every single level, ensuring that we work hand in hand with the private sector so that working people thriving and businesses thriving are not seen as mutually exclusive. In fact, they are part of one and the same vision of the same city. And I will end with this, that when G.D. Crain founded Advertising Age in 1930, it was the dawn of the Great Depression. The idea of starting a new business may have seemed like a folly. And yet 95 years later, Ad Age remains the pace setter in its field. If we limit ourselves to the realm of what seems possible only in that moment, the greatness that lives within impossibility will be forever out of reach. So I thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, you went a minute over, but I do appreciate the Ad Age reference, so we let you do that.
It was a final second call of if I took the time or left it to you.
Thank you for being here with us today. And I know that you know Nick,
A constituent.
reporter. So I think we'll get started. Nick, I think you've got the first question.
I've got the first question. Thanks, Assemblymember, for being here. We're going to start with some housing questions on your proposed rent freeze. As everyone in this room probably knows, you've proposed freezing the rent on all stabilized units for 4 years. You've proposed doing that before the Rent Guidelines Board has collected any data, though, on landlords' costs. Doesn't that conflict with the law and potentially open up your plan to legal challenges?
Well, first I do have to share a story that I knew that Nick was a reporter. I didn't know that he was a constituent until one day I knocked on his door and found him on the other side of it. I was asking if he needed any help from my district office in Astoria. You know, I've spoken, yes, of a 4-year rent freeze for rent-stabilized tenants. This would mean rent freeze for about 2.5 million New Yorkers. And I've said this out of a reflection of the chasm that we've seen opening up between the continued increase in profits for the landlords of these units amidst the stagnation of the median salary of the tenants of these units, the median household income being about $60,000. And we've seen oftentimes that the Rent Guidelines Board will conduct their studies, as they should, and they will find these statistics, and then the board will take a decision that oftentimes conflicts starkly with those same findings. And it is time for us to follow these very findings. And part of what I'll also just say is that the impetus here is to provide relief to a disproportionately working and middle class set of New Yorkers. It is not, however, to punish the landlords of those units. And the reason I create this distinction is that to freeze the rent does not also preclude you from working on the necessity of a property tax reform agenda that is currently part of the reason why it's so difficult to maintain rental housing across the city. It does not preclude you from looking at examples like Milford Street Captive, where a number of landlords have come together to address one of the highest rising costs in the maintenance of these buildings, which is affordable housing insurance. And they've pooled together their risk to look to depress that cost. It also doesn't preclude you from looking at the ways in which the city has used its thumb on the scale to support Con Edison when they want to increase gas and electric by $65 a month by signing a letter in support in that rate case, or to increase the water bill to the highest it's been in 13 years.
Great. So we have a question from Ann Korchak, board president of the Small Property Owners of New York. And Ann writes, small rental buildings are disproportionately taxed in New York City. Do you support comprehensive property tax reform, and what specific reforms would you pursue?
Absolutely. I support comprehensive property tax reform, and I say that as somebody who currently sits on the Assembly's Property Tax Committee. And someone who has, I've sought to introduce legislation. I've been told in no uncertain terms that this is an issue where we are waiting for the mayor. It's an issue of such a scale that there is a question of what is a citywide vision for it. And we've seen, this mayor promised he would fix it in 100 days, has not done so, has sought to defend this same system in court, has lost many a time. The previous mayor had a commission that released its findings on the final day of the administration. I think there are a number of those findings that are worth pursuing. I also think that Martha Stark has done quite an incredible amount of research in the ways in which the current system is unfair in many a different way. It's unfair in the different burdens it places on homeowners in different parts of the city. It's also unfair in the ways in which it asks moderately priced co-op and condo owners to foot a bill that luxury co-op and condo owners by and large are able to pass on. I think about a property, I think it's at 220 Central Park, might have been the most expensive property at one point. It was sold for about $228 million. Because of the property tax system we have here in New York City and the ways in which assessments are made, a $228 million property has been assessed by the city of New York as having a value of $9.4 million. If we were to tax just that property by the valuation that it actually has, it would raise $3 million, which is money we could then give to McKinsey to design another trash can in this city. We shouldn't do that, but we do.
And just to follow up on the politics, though, of property tax reform, one reason previous mayors haven't succeeded is because the politics of it are, toxic in Albany. Why?
There are winners and losers, right? A broken system still has incentives for maintenance. And I think that's the importance of bringing creativity as both the lens in which you can fix this system. And I think that there have been a number of proposals that can make it easier with circuit breakers also to ensure that any fix is not one that then creates a new level of burden on a different class of homeowners or owners of different sets of rental properties. But also I think it's a question of political will. Are you willing to have that fight? And so much of my campaign has been a campaign about trying to bring New Yorkers who have either lost faith in politics or never had it to begin with into our democracy. And one of the reasons that New Yorkers lose faith in politics is because the examples they have of city and state government that they interact with most frequently are not ones that inspire confidence. If you're a homeowner and you have a property tax system that every politician will tell you is broken, and yet you keep paying that property tax at the levels that you've been paying, it begs the question of why should you trust anyone else's assessment of what's broken or whether they'll do anything about it. It's one of the reasons that one of my first focuses in state government was on the MTA, was because of the fact that for many New Yorkers, this was the most frequent interaction with government. And so every time there was a delay, every time that we could see the inefficiency of that system, it begged the question of why trust the same entity to do anything more than what they're doing right now. And one of my own reflections has been that we have made a mistake as progressives and I say this personally, a frustration that we've allowed someone like Elon Musk to make it seem as if
the concerns of fraud and efficiency and waste, even quality of life, that these are somehow right-wing concerns. These should be at the heart of any politics for working class people. And I think that's part of the remarks I was sharing earlier, is a desire to bring that same level of expectation of excellence, of, in many ways, the ROI of any investment we make. It has to be at the same standard that people are holding themselves to in the private sector.
Thanks. One more housing question for now. You've said you've changed your mind about the role of private development in solving the housing crisis. Can you describe what led to that change, and also just what is your current view of the role of market rate housing?
I think that the private sector has an immense role to play in producing the level of housing supply that we desperately need in this city. I've often spoken about the fact that New York City is struggling to build 4 homes for every 1,000 people. And Jersey City's at 7, Tokyo's at 10. These are examples that we look at that we cannot disentangle from a vacancy rate that is at a crisis level. And I think it will require the private sector not only, being a part of how we actually build out the housing we need, but also being encouraged. And I've been taken aback, frankly, by many of the conversations I've had with leaders within New York City real estate as to how one of the largest costs they face is the cost of waiting. And I think that there are critically important ways in which we have to interrogate those costs. And I think even of, you look at the question of SECRA. This is a state law, right? But it is also one that has profound implications at the local level. And within SECRA, you are asked to make a 10 to 15-year prediction of traffic flow in the area. There's no way that that is something you can actually be bound to, given the ways in which traffic is transforming itself every single year. And you just think about the predictions that were made a few years prior to the influx of Uber and Lyft into the city and how that made a mockery of whatever these predictions may be. And yet those are the same kinds of predictions that are then used as the legal framework for a lot of lawsuits against these very kinds of proposals. So I say this to say, as someone who believes firmly in the public sector, in regulation, if you don't have a reason for that regulation any longer, then you have to ask yourself what purpose it's serving today.
So let's move off of this topic for a second, Assemblyman. One of the things I'd like to bring up, and this is not news to you, critics often cite your youth.
Critics?
A few. Cite your youth and your lack of governing experience. So who from the business community or government have you met with that you can share with this room to reassure those skeptics? And with the election just weeks away, can you share the names of people that you're considering for key administration roles?
Well, the first thing I'll say about my youth is every day I grow older. And I'm only doing so out of a reflection of that concern, trying to meet it head on. But I take the question very seriously, because I think what I was sharing there, and what I think many people here in this room know, is that we are only as good as the teams around us. And I think for too long there has been a style of leadership that has understood its work as only being able to be delivered through ever-increasing amounts of micromanagement. And that is not actually how you deliver these kinds of results. I think often of a conversation I had with someone who served in the Bloomberg administration. They told me of a day where they made a mistake and it was across the news, and they got a call from then Mayor Bloomberg, and his words were, "Do it again." And it was this belief that you still have my backing, we both know you made a mistake, and you still have more work to do. And I think that kind of belief, that kind of understanding that only by attracting the top talent can you, in fact, deliver on this vision for the city. And one thing that I'll say many of us in this room have in common is I too am reading of new names I'm apparently considering for top positions every day. I have not made any personnel commitments. I have, however, said a few things. The first is that I will consider everyone on the basis of the work that they do, not on the basis of who appointed them. I have my critiques of the Adams administration. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider those working within that administration. I've said, for example, that I am seriously considering Police Commissioner Tisch, and I'm doing so because of the work that the commissioner has done while leading that department, specifically heartened by the swift and decisive action to uproot corruption at the upper levels of the department upon entering into that role. And I mean this for anyone across the administration. And what I have also been doing is speaking with leaders across a variety of these administrations. And so those are conversations I've had on reflections on what it looks like to lead from within, what the internal structure looks like, even just the question of how you want to set up your first deputy mayor, how many direct reports you want, how many deputy mayors you want themselves. And so that means having conversations with Dan Doctoroff about what the vision for virtuous growth looked like, what it could look like if, with only 6 months left until the World Cup, how much of the Olympic bid ethos could we bring with such a finite period of time? It means, speaking to Maria Torres Springer and understanding the ways in which she and so many others within the Adams administration were able to shepherd the question of City of Yes, including, Dan Garodnick's incredible work on that. So these are the conversations that I'm having in preparation, while also not looking to measure the drapes.
Great. So those are some of the people that you've spoken with, which thank you for sharing. But can you share with us some of the people that you're actually considering beyond Commissioner Tisch?
I'll keep it short. I can't. Okay. And part of that is that I don't like to have job interviews in public. I do take them very seriously, however. And I can assure you that as soon as I do have any names that I will be committed to working with, those are ones I'll share publicly.
Great. So let's move on to regulation, which is a big issue in New York. And Jim Whalen, the president of the Real Estate Board of New York, is asking about Local Law 97, which, for everyone in the room, that's the climate law that is going to require building owners to pay for costly climate retrofits in the next few years, or else they'll face significant fines. So Jim is asking, what role should the city play in helping property owners comply with these costly mandates like Local Law 97?
I think it's a great question. I think in fact I'll first give an example of NYCHA. NYCHA has a clean energy challenge where they procured tens of thousands of heat pumps after picking a public-private partnership. Those heat pumps are currently being installed within Woodside houses where there's a pilot. These are heat pumps that have seen resident satisfaction at around 90%. They've seen energy savings, I think, north of 50%. They've been a success by all metrics. And part of the reason that NYCHA is able to do this is also economies of scale. And I think often about the city's role with Local Law 97 of what if the city, which I think there's an existing idea of like a New York City accelerator, but what if we made it a one-stop shop? Not only one that took away many of the application fees that are required to be a part of fulfilling Local Law 97, but also was able to procure the kinds of necessary investments into building infrastructure that could be then distributed at scale. And I think of these as examples because there was an example that stays with me of the Italian government doing a large-scale procurement, I think it was of heat pumps, and just how successful this procurement was to try and reduce costs for homeowners across the country. Our job here should be looking at the most important part of Local Law 97 being compliance, not looking to punish those who can't get there. We have to ask ourselves, how do we help everyone get there?
A question about the ballot questions related to housing on the ballot this year. This is from Carl Weisbrod of HRNA Advisors. As you know, these questions would speed up housing approvals by amending the city charter, but they faced pushback from the city council and from organized labor. Do you plan to vote for these questions?
So I am glad that these questions are on the ballot. I'm glad that New Yorkers will actually have the chance to cast their vote for these. I'm in active conversations about these very questions with both policy experts and stakeholders. I've yet to take a position on that.
I heard from some labor leaders yesterday, they were saying that they've urged you to oppose them. Have you spoken to anyone who's urging you to support them?
Yes. I think there's a healthy array of opinions as it is in our city.
Okay. Shifting gears to the federal government, President Trump has threatened to cut off federal aid to New York City once you take office. If he made good on that threat on day one of your mayoralty, how would you immediately respond?
My friend President Trump. I think one tendency we have is to treat any threat from President Trump as if it is already law, just by virtue of him having said it. And we have to treat his pronouncements as we would treat them from anyone, which is to see whether they actually fall within the law. And many of these threats are ones that are blatantly outside of the law. And I think the suspension of $18 billion in federal grants that was recently announced, on one level, we have to understand this at an attempt at political retribution amidst a shutdown where President Trump and the Republican Party would rather a federal government shutdown than keeping 4 million Americans on their health care. At another level, we also have to understand that these are the kinds of actions that drive up costs across the city, across the state, across the country. Because the more instability there is in these kinds of contracts, the more anyone in the private sector will say, why should I take the risk of having to subject myself and my work to these kinds of conditions? And we cannot disentangle this kind of a threat from the fact that the promise was made to New Yorkers decades ago that the 2nd Avenue subway would extend to 125th Street. And here yet again is another threat to that. Here yet again is another threat to New Yorkers actually being able to save time on their commutes, not sit in bumper-to-bumper traffic. And all of it just because of what is so often just the games of Washington, so divorced from the needs of New Yorkers. So I think the first thing is to actually interrogate the legality of any of these pronouncements, of any of these threats. The second thing is to fight. And what I mean by fighting is actually being willing to not only publicly oppose this kind of an agenda, but also to ensure you're using every tool at your disposal. In California, the Attorney General there estimates that for every dollar they spent in legal fees, they recovered more than $30,000 in federal funding that would otherwise have been stripped of the state. And I'm lucky to be here in a state where we have an Attorney General in Tish James who's done an incredible job to that end, a Governor, Kathy Hochul, who has been leading the state in this fight back, both of whom have endorsed this campaign and both of whom would be partners in fighting for New Yorkers.
Yeah. So the next question, I'm going to switch to just competitiveness and jobs in New York City. Emma Foman, the CEO of Abney, writes in, what concrete steps would you take to make New York City the most competitive place to attract top talent and grow businesses?
We have to make, for this to be the business choice, we have to make the city of choice. And what I mean by that is that too often we have rested on our laurels of our greatness, of the fact that we are a destination. We have to prove that and earn that every single day. And the way in which we do that is to ensure that, one, this is a city where businesses know exactly what kind of regulations they will have to deal with and why they will have to deal with them. And if there are those that we cannot explain, we should not have them. And I'll give you an example at the small business level. I spoke to an owner of a barbershop recently who told me that he had to fill out 24 forms, go to 7 different agencies, and attend 12 in-person events to start a barbershop in New York City. That barbershop is starting in spite of our city, not because of our city. And so part of this is taking a hard look at many of the decisions that we've made and asking ourselves whether these deserve to stay any longer. Do we really need a restaurant to pay $25 a year for the right to sell a frozen dessert? We tell ourselves we need single stairwell versus dual stairwell on the basis of safety, and yet municipalities that took a different approach have the same levels of safety and yet far lower construction costs as an implication of that same decision. So that's one way that we make this a city of choice for these businesses. The second way is that we also understand that for these businesses, the foundation of any of their economic agenda is also a city that has an incredible quality of life. That's a quality of life that is built upon public safety that we deliver across the 5 boroughs, and I'm excited not only to be working with the police department to deliver that, but also to have one of the largest investments in public safety through our Department of Community Service that will finally address a mental health and homelessness crisis that is often at the heart of many New Yorkers' concerns around that same safety, around that same quality of life, and that we will deliver a cleaner and more efficient city by actually funding the very agencies within city government that are tasked with doing so, and by flipping the incentives that are currently taking place. The last thing I'll just share on that. The incentives in city government are such that if you have a trash can on a street corner that is overflowing, the response is often remove the trash can. It's not increase collection from that trash can or have an additional trash can, it's to take the trash can away altogether. That beggars belief. Or when you are fighting with the Department of Transportation to have street safety improvements, oftentimes it waits until someone is killed at that very intersection, and then the improvements are immediate. These incentives have to be flipped so that everyone who works here, who lives here, who wants to start a business here, can understand that they're doing so because it is the most rational decision, as opposed to one they have to do in spite of the conditions they see around themselves.
And just, can we follow up on that for a second? Every mayor says they want to cut small business red tape. Eric Adams said that. Why? What will you do differently? Why will you actually achieve that?
I think you'll find many differences between myself and Eric Adams. I would also say that, you know, part of what animates my vision for this city is not only the belief of government's job is to make life easier here, but that we have a responsibility in showcasing that belief through the quality of service that we're providing across the city. And the question of whether a small business can flourish or not, it is at the heart of this vision. And so often when I speak to small businesses, who in many ways are the embodiment of a spirit of aspiration in this city, what I'll hear is their interactions with city government often have to do with an investigator whose findings have more to do with their attitude on the day than any violation of that moment. And the previous administration cut fines and fees by 40%. I've said that we're going to cut it by 50%. And I've said that we can do that because we've seen what's already possible, but also we have a city government of a budget of about $116 billion. It is not being funded by these kinds of violation fees. And too often, whether we're having this conversation or even Local Law 97, the focus is less on compliance and more on punishment. And we have to get back to the question of compliance.
So one of the things that we know at Crain's is that the business community is concerned about the MTA's reliability and cost. So what specific steps would you take to improve service and funding? And should NYC take a larger role in running the system?
I think the MTA, there's so much to say about it. I think the business community is right to be concerned about the question of reliability, the question of efficiency. Actually, the first time I ever worked with the partnership of the City of New York was on the question of the frequency of our subways. You know, we had launched a campaign of Fix the MTA in Albany, and we were working together with the partnership to try and increase funding for subways. And we won, I think at the time it was $35 million to do so. But we know that it is still far from what is needed in this city. We talk about ourselves having a world-class city with world-class public transit, but every time New Yorkers go for a vacation to a city elsewhere and they come back and they see what actually could be. You know, I've heard from many New Yorkers, especially if they're coming back from Japan and they talk about high-speed rail. Oftentimes my example of high-speed rail is when a conductor says the train's going express and we're going to miss the local stops. And that's been the case for too many New Yorkers. So there are a few things here. First, we have to make sure that every single dollar is being spent most efficiently. And what I mean by that is that the former governor, Andrew Cuomo, he at one point announced a reorganization plan of the MTA. Part of this was driven by an impetus to show that costs were being saved. But there was no actual rationale in which positions were not being rehired for or which positions were being fired. So what you ended up having was an ad hoc system whereby anyone who retired or left, their position was simply not replaced. And so the differing levels of public capacity within the MTA started to shift on what they could do internally. And part of the legacy of that is when we built the 2nd Avenue subway, the first portion of it, that first phase we spent more money on consultants than construction. And this is part of the ballooning costs. I'm not just talking about the suspension of the $18 billion, but the fact that we are losing the ability to do things ourselves. And oftentimes we're outsourcing these responsibilities in a language of cost savings, but we're finding that that cost is just continuing to balloon. The last thing that I'll add is I think the city should be doing far more in its engagement with the MTA. And I actually think of Mayor Bloomberg as an example of what you can do. You know, Mayor Bloomberg was so passionate about the extension of the 7 train line to Hudson Yards that the city took on the responsibility of paying for that subway station, which is historically a state responsibility. And much of my campaign, you know, has been focused on public transit, part of it as a reflection of what's possible if we're actually committed to it, part of it also because amidst the MTA being a state agency, the city controls the streets of this city. The city determines the speed by which buses will actually travel. And right now they're the slowest buses in the country. They're traveling at an average speed of 8 miles an hour. And for all of the focus on the economic relief and the public safety relief, what we sometimes miss are the larger economic benefits to productivity if we were to have buses that were fast and free, and how we could ensure that this economy was stimulated in a manner that currently it's being denied.
Thanks. Shifting gears again, this question is from Danny Meyer, restaurateur, founder of Union Square Hospitality Group. It's about tourism. What's your plan to grow domestic and international tourism, and what role should tourism play in the city's economy?
I think tourism should play an incredible role in this economy. And I think what we're looking at right now are the losses of about $4 billion in just this year alone. Part of that is a reflection of the consequences of President Trump's orientation to the world at large, but also an immigration agenda and the enforcement of that agenda that has left many across this country and across the world asking themselves why they would come here when they read stories of tourists or green card holders or undocumented New Yorkers or Americans being stopped at airports, being detained for days, being asked to give up the documentation that they have. And yet we know that tourism is a lifeblood of this city. Next year we have the largest sporting event in the world coming. And it's as if no one is thinking about it from within city government at this moment. And I lament that the ways in which, Dan Doctorow's use of the Olympic bid was a catalyst for the transformation of the built environment of the city. Here we have an even larger sporting event that has not been used in that manner. And I have an idea, and actually I'm quite excited at the conversations I've had with Abney and with other business leaders across the city as to what those 6 months could be put forward to. But I think it will have to also be a message to the world that they are welcome in this city, that we want them to visit New York City, and I'll be proud to be the first immigrant mayor of the city in generations to make it clear that the destinies of this city and the world are interwoven together. And it's time that we actually have an alternative vision for what politics can look like beyond just an echoing of what Washington, D.C. is saying.
You mentioned all the tourists who are going to come here for the World Cup. Where are they going to stay? We've mostly banned Airbnb. We've mostly banned the construction of new hotels through the Hotel Text Amendment. Should either of those two things be revisited?
No, I continue to have concerns around the proposals that have been put forward around Airbnb, specifically around the ways in which they could transform the availability of housing that is currently on the market. And I think that one of the key things we can do is first to ensure that New Yorkers can even broach the question of, not New Yorkers, rather tourists, of affording the city, because many are asking themselves first whether they will be even safe in this city. And they don't mean that with regards to the NYPD or crime. They mean that with regards to ICE. They mean that with the threats that have been put forward of having those very agents surrounding these stadiums. And I think that that's going to be one of the most critical visions. And then also ensuring that our city is ready for all of the people who will come, and to ensure that when they move through the two host cities for the World Cup final, it is an easy experience to do so.
So we've got less than a minute, so you'll have to answer this last question quickly. But this one comes from Karen Ignani, the CEO of Emblem Health. And she asks, given cuts at the federal level, would you expand the mission of the New York City Department of Health under your administration?
I think there's a lot of work for us to do in New York City to step up to this moment. I think also some of that has to do with also heading to Albany with a vision that for whatever revenue raisers that are on the table, as we pursue the ones I've put forward, as we pursue a vision for what it means to defend this state from the worst of these cuts, is also to ensure that we are protecting those with the least from the worst of what's being put forward in Washington, and also that we are understanding that this battle is not yet done in Washington. These cuts which have been promised are still ones that are up for political debate. And I've appreciated the ways in which so many have been holding the line in this moment, because the difference in giving in to this administration is one that would transform the amount of money that New Yorkers and Americans have to pay for these healthcare premiums.
Great, thank you very much. Let's give it up for Assemblyman Zohran.
Thank you.
See you around the neighborhood. So our next speaker is Curtis Sliwa, founder of the Guardian Angels, the community safety group that he launched in 1979. Curtis is also a longtime radio personality and an advocate on public safety issues. Please welcome Curtis Sliwa.
First, I want to thank all of you for coming here this morning. As you can see, I'm not wearing my traditional red beret, and I'll explain momentarily. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a time machine trip, then to now. Last night I was fortunate enough, my wife Nancy, who's an e-attorney, took me to the Yankee game. I hadn't been to the new Yankee Stadium in quite some time. I am a preservationist in many ways, and I love the old stadium. But it harkened me back because I felt we were lucky charms last night when Aaron Judge hit that 3-run homer and led the comeback of the Yankees 2-1. Hopefully we take out Toronto. But in 1977, I was running a McDonald's in a high-crime area of the Bronx. The Bronx was burning. It was massive flight. In the 70s, 1 million people had already picked up and left New York City, many of them from the Bronx. And they went into nearby New Jersey and Westchester and Connecticut. They couldn't get out quick enough, but some on fixed income. All they did was put more bars on the windows, locks on the doors, and nightlife ceased to exist as a result of the Son of Sam in 76. So there I was. I hadn't put on a red beret yet, managing a very large McDonald's. And while conducting the shift, that was the night that Reggie Jackson, on 3 consecutive pitches, hit home runs. And the Yankees beat Tommy Lasorda and the Dodgers 4-2. But a very famous statement was made on that national broadcast by Howard Cosell as the cameras pointed in the distance to buildings that were on fire. They had been torched. The Bronx was burning. And Howard Cosell said at that moment, you know, George Steinbrenner Sr., owner of the most famous franchise in sports in the world, was thinking of moving to the Meadowlands. I remember I stopped in fear, fright, and hysteria and said the only thing that we ever moved to the Meadowlands was garbage and the bodies of dead members of organized crime. And that's when I began my movement of Improve, Don't Move. And it started to move in the development of cleaning up the streets and, most importantly, patrolling the trains and the streets in that red beret. Because we were under fiscal constraint. The Financial Control Board had been set up in 1975 by Governor Kerry. It was perilous times. We were on the brink of fiscal dissolvency, and I believe we're moving in that direction now. Felix Roatan of the bankers and Victor Gottbaum, who represented the unions, pooled their resources to keep the city afloat. I knew Victor later on in life, and he explained to me how difficult the process was. And a brand new mayor, Ed Koch, came in, and now he had restrictions on how he could spend money. Imagine, politicians with restrictions on how to spend money. Something you all have to do in business, everybody has to do in our household. Federal government doesn't, 37 trillion, we keep printing money. But now the city had to actually declare how it was spending every nickel, dime, and penny. And remember, there were draconian cuts in police, firefighters, social workers, educators. And it also led up to the debates of 1977 featuring another Cuomo, a much better Cuomo, Mario Cuomo. It was Ed Koch, the Democratic nominee, versus Mario Cuomo, the liberal. Barry Farber, the talk show host, who actually had lost to Bella Abzug in a congressional run the year before, and Roy Goodman, who was the heir to the Ex-Lax fortune, Republican state senator of the Upper East Side, who was a Rockefeller liberal Republican. We had 12 debates. Gabe Pressman, the dean of the News Corps, hosted many of them. And I'll never forget the moment that I was watching in my apartment in the Bronx, and Ed Koch turned to Mario Cuomo and said, of course we have to make cuts because we will fiscally dissolve. We're under the Financial Control Board. And Mario, the true liberal that he was, said, no cuts. We cannot make any cuts in the budget. Well, luckily Ed Koch went on and operated with those restrictions. So now, the here and now, right across the street, just to give you an idea of the direction I'm going, I have led with my wife the movement to remove the horse carriage industry. And there are drivers there who depend on that for their livelihood, and replace it, as has been done around the world, with electric carriages so that they continue to earn a living. There are 180,000 drivers in New York City now who are in perilous times. They are fearful of these driverless cars that the Adams administration is doing a test with. Imagine 180,000 men and women, whether they're Uber drivers, many of you use them, Lyft or yellow cabs, who are fearful that they will have no alternative income. And as we're moving, they won't. Then I deal with my wife, Nancy, who's an e-attorney, a millennial, and I talk with her and her friends, many of them who believed in the American dream. Go 4 years education. She went to Stony Brook, went to Brooklyn Law, got her law degree like many of her friends. Some of them are CPAs, some of them are financial analysts, some of them are lawyers like herself. And the threat of AI, artificial intelligence, in the business community, they're saying, you know, it's coming, there's nothing you can do. It'll actually create jobs. Create jobs? You better tell the millennials and the Gen Zers that, because they're in fear that the American dream that they were promised is dissolving right in front of them, because they followed the route to be able to own their own home, their own car, be able to live in an apartment by themselves instead of having dormitory-style living while making $155,000 a year with 3 other roommates, very much like it was for them in college. And all of that has to be addressed. And it's really not. It's sort of, well, AI is coming. Well, AI is coming. By 2030, we will have to double the electricity output. Right now, we're suffering with extraordinary electricity rates, courtesy of Andrew Cuomo, who took Indian Point offline. That was 25% of our electricity, with no alternative, no natural gas. So now when you look at average ratepayers, whether you're in business or you're homeowners, skyrocketing rates of water and sewage, fees and fines. I'm the only candidate who says we've got to across the board cut the taxes or the flight will continue, corporate flight, and then we have to maintain our workers, especially those who are trained. They're also fleeing. We got to cut the income tax. I know I have to deal with the state on that. We have to cut the corporate tax. I know I have to deal with the state. But we can deal with the property tax, which the city controls. And there are no efforts to do that. I haven't heard that from any of my adversaries, Zohran or Andrew Cuomo. Secondarily, we have to, and I've been advised by the 2 best in the business of knowing how to run a budget and also how to run a business and run government. Larry Kudlow and his economic advisors are on my team, and former Governor Pataki, who both Democrats and Republicans acknowledge had a great job that he did in 12 years. We got to cut this budget, $118 billion budget, $41 billion alone for the Department of Education, $42,000 per student, 100,000 less students enrolled, 1/3 of truants every day. Average 4th grader, 2/3 of them cannot read, write, or do math at grade level. We have 200 schools with less than 200 students. There's mayoral control, but it's Michael Mulgrew, the union leader, who controls how these schools operate. I would conflate them. And we got to cut that bureaucracy. If you go to Tweed Courthouse, an appropriate place, the home of Tammany Hall for the Department of Education, you have 13 deputy chancellors, 50 department heads. When you talk to the principals in the school, as I do, who hire the staff and now hire the teachers, they don't know who those deputy chancellors are. They don't even know who the department heads are. Cut at the top so that we can get more money in the classroom. Teachers are still paying out of their pocket for basic supplies. That's one agency of many that I will cut. Bob Holden, who leads Democrats for Sliwa, has been a great councilman for 8 years. He's term limited, but he was a teacher for 40 years and a civic leader. So I have a team of competent men and women. I'm not omnipotent, like many of the candidates claim to be. I know I will have to rely on the best men and women available, both from the corporate sector and those who have been great civil servants who have never been elevated.
Mr.
This
Sliwa.
will be an administration that recognizes new ideas, new concepts, and incredibly what we have to do.
We're right at the end of our time,
the implementation of the Financial Control Board that already exists, but it's in mothballs. Cut taxes across the board. Cut the spending in government. None of my opponents have even suggested that. In fact, one, Andrew Cuomo, sounded just like his father, Mario.
Why don't you come on over here? We're at the end of our time. Okay. We went a little over here, so we'll get right started. Nick, I think you're jumping in with the first question.
Mr. Sliwa, thanks for being here. Our first question is just about your candidacy overall. You're under a lot of pressure from the business community to withdraw from the race since your campaign makes it more likely that Zohran Mamdani will win, just doing the math. So why are you staying in the race given how strongly you're criticizing Mamdani's policies?
You know, it's interesting. Why don't I drop out of the race? It was June 24th when Cuomo lost Zohran Mamdani and threw in the towel, lost by 13%. 2 months before, the polls were saying he was going to have a coronation, right? He was ahead 40%. I'm going to trust the polls. And I was being told, oh, you got to drop out and back Eric Adams. Eric, he's the savior. A guy who was so corrupt, campaign financial crimes. He should have been in jail with Bobby Menendez, Gold Bar Menendez, but the Trump administration saved him. So I was to drop out then. How would that have worked out when we saw last Sunday before he fled to Albania that he was dropping out? What an idiot I would have been. And many of you were telling me I should have dropped out, right? I am the only mainstream other candidate other than Zohran. I am the Republican candidate. I also have an independent line, first ever, protect animals, no-kill shelters, put animal abusers in jail. I have raised double the amount of Andrew Cuomo from city residents, 15,000, average donation 129. I have more money than Andrew Cuomo. I'm going to drop out? You're all business people. Does that make any sense? How about letting the people make the determination on November 4th, right? Vote. Vote. Get the vote out.
So sounds like you're still considering. On public safety, you've staked your whole career on public safety. Can you say what's missing from the ways that Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani talk about public safety?
Well, just the other day, I think we can all agree, whether you agree with his politics or not, Rudy Giuliani was the best law and order mayor we had. He inherited a city in 1993, 2,000 murders a year, 10,000 unsolved shootings. And when it came to public safety, he's deemed me his apprentice, because I really was. I learned so much from Rudy and his staff at that time that put into place accountability in the police department and drove the crime down and made New Yorkers feel safe. Prior to that, they were talking about dividing up the city into 5 separate cities, that it was unmanageable and the crime was overwhelming. If you don't deal with the crisis of public safety, then you can't retain your workers. This is a debate cycle amongst the three of us who remain that has been void of discussing women as victims. My wife brought that to everybody's attention. She did my first TV commercial. First time in my life I ever kept my mouth shut. There was nothing that I could say. And she pointed out, you're in the subways, you're in the streets, you're being perved on, sexually harassed. They have this new term, random attacks. What do you mean a random attack? They're targeting women. Women are the majority of the workforce. They become the majority in some places managers. Nightlife cannot survive. They own restaurants, bars, and nightclubs. They manage them. They work there, and they tell me, I can't afford to keep taking yellow cabs, Ubers, and Lyfts. I feel unsafe in New York City. If nothing more, we have to protect the women who are like Bambi in the middle of hunting season wearing an orange fluorescent vest while the hunters are training down their Winchester double-barrel shotguns on them. Talk to the women. Stop just talking to men, and you'll know they don't feel safe.
Can we just refocus on policy a little bit? What's missing from the
Sure.
ways?
In the subways, of which I'm the only candidate in the subways every day, even with the threats against me lately, for the first time in my life, I've had armed guards with me. And I'm the guy that was shot 5 times on the orders of John Gotti Sr. to John Gotti Jr. and the Gambino crime family. Never had armed guards. But I still go on the subways. And what we have to do there is take the uniformed transit police and put them on the moving trains. They're on the platforms. They're up near the turnstiles, and they're watching the Irish sweepstakes. Men and women going under the turnstile, over the turnstile, through the emergency gate. Citizens Budget Commission said we lost $1 billion in various fare evasion just last year alone. We're going to stop the fare evasion. We're going to ticket them. We're going to arrest them. I pay, everybody pays. You have reduced fare. There's all different ways we can help the poor and the indigent, but that has to stop. And you have to have the police officers going up and down the moving trains as they used to. Most of the problems are on the moving trains. Do you really think somebody's going to get off on a platform and go looking for a police officer to deal with the problem? They're stuck on the train with the violators, the emotionally disturbed, the homeless who are acting up. That all has to be addressed. The homeless come off. We put them in safe shelters because they're not safe now. I've been in half of them. And we take the emotionally disturbed and put them in the state hospitals, of which Andrew Cuomo, when he came in, had 40,000 beds. He made draconian cuts. There were only 4,000. So he's part of the problem. No cash bail. Zohran is all into that. They are the candidates who favor the violators. I am the candidate who protects the victims. That's how you can differentiate those two and me.
So let's switch gears to something that's important to this audience in housing and property taxes. So another question from Jim Whalen at Rebney. What would you say to mom and pop landlords facing double-digit cost increases and foreclosure risk?
The mom and pop shops, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Landlords.
I'm very, very familiar with that in the outer boroughs, but also ever since this additional tack of congestion pricing, a complete disaster. Have you walked down the side streets? Have you walked down the main thoroughfares? Across the street from City Hall itself, 9 small shops that were run by merchants for many years are now closed, and they put this brown paper wrap on it that we used to wrap our books in public school with when you couldn't afford the high-priced wrap. It looks chintzy. It looks bad. Anybody walking up and down is saying New York City is in decline. And when I ask the merchants time and time again, why are you closing? They say, we don't have enough foot traffic. And we're constantly being taken advantage of by the shoplifters who come in and out with an easy pass. And my margins are so small, I just can't do it. Then you go into the outer boroughs, it's a complete catastrophe. They employ 1 million people in the small businesses of New York City. 1 million New Yorkers get their gainful employment in small businesses. And they're closing up for a variety of reasons. The fees, the fines, the property tax. Many times the only reason you can stay in business is you actually own the building. They've raised it 20%. I'm going to cut that property tax. That's one thing that a mayor has control of, is the property tax, and it's outrageous. 20% in the outer boroughs, small property owners who have maybe 2, 3, 4 family homes. I think the corporate rate is about 11%. And you say to yourself, and all it keeps doing is escalating, which is driving the fear, fright, hysteria out of our city and to other areas where you can still run a business and not have to worry about being taxed from the cradle to the grave, which is what we're doing now.
Thanks. A question on housing. You have opposed City of Yes and the housing-related charter amendments, which would, according to many experts, speed up the development of new housing. So without those tools, how would you make it easier to build affordable housing?
Well, I am the only person running for mayor who says, obviously, vote for me down the Republican line, vote straight Republican on the front, and on the back, vote no on all the initiative and referendums. These initiative and referendums were put together by Eric Adams and his appointees of charter revision. People who testified 2 years in a row wanted Sanctuary City to be voted on. Now, I'm opposed to Sanctuary City, but I would say I would follow whatever the dictates of the residents of the city are. And boy, that would have really brought out a tremendous vote on both sides. Eric Adams wouldn't allow it. And so he knew he wasn't going to run. He knew, he foresaw that he would be one and done. So he decided Eric Adams gone wild. And this is the City of Yes on steroids. He wants to eliminate the local city council person. You don't have to deal with her or him. Zoning restrictions. What zoning restrictions? Community board. I remember I was in 4th grade, PS 114, Alan Topol, my best teacher ever, when we actually had required civics courses, which we don't now, American history and current events. I have 3 sons in the public school system. They're not being taught any of that. And Alan Topol said then, Mayor Robert Wagner created community boards to give more control in the outer boroughs and the residential communities. So I am opposed to the City of Yes that would destroy the residential makeup, especially of the outer boroughs. I am a preservationist in many ways, which clearly these two candidates are not. Andrew Cuomo is in the back pockets of the developers and realtors as his the predecessor Eric Adams was when they were playing Mario Brothers, going back and forth with their millions, trying to determine who can beat Zohran Mamdani. You need to listen to people in the outer boroughs. Yes, we need affordable housing. Stay out of the parks, stay out of the wetlands. There's a place to build affordable housing, but you have to go through the regimen that needs to be addressed. You can't just come into neighborhoods, put up a 40-story apartment building, no parking, by the way, no capital improvements in the area, and nobody consults the community at all. Vote no, straight down, on all the initiative and referendum ballot items.
Can I just follow up on that? You said City of Yes should have been put to the voters, but these charter amendments would be put to the voters, but you're supporting the lawsuit that would knock them off the ballot. So why do you not trust voters?
Well, because of the way the wording is. The wording is very confusing. By the way, my allies, Adrian Adams in the city council that is predominantly DSA, liberal, progressive, and Democrats, and members of the Common Caucus. So Curtis Sliwa is allied with the predominantly Democratic city council, which shows that I would be able to work with the city council. Eric Adams couldn't. We know Adrian Adams was the real mayor. And Bill de Blasio, he only spent half a day destroying this city. I describe Zohran Mamdani as Bill de Blasio on steroids.
So just staying with this for one more minute, though, I don't think you actually addressed how would you actually make it easier to build affordable housing in New York?
Well, number one, there are all the regulations, there's the bureaucracy, Department of Buildings, and I even told Rudy Giuliani when he was mayor and Bloomberg, the most inefficient of all the agencies. They're never there to help you with the paperwork. In fact, sometimes they show up when the quota is imposed, and there are quotas. For every agency that can write tickets, $1 billion of tickets are built into the budget. How do I know that? I lived for 13 years with Melinda Katz when she was the city councilwoman in charge of land use. She became borough president. She's now the Democratic DA. We've raised two great sons. And I would question her. And she would say, oh, yeah, the bureaucracy is so in place. You would think that socialism already existed in New York City when you're dealing with the Department of Buildings. That would be all cut. If you have a vital project to an area, affordable housing is very vital. There are places it could be put, but the Department of Buildings is oftentimes your enemy, whether you're making changes in your existing occupancy or you're trying to build a new facility.
So let's switch gears again. There's only about 8 weeks between election and inauguration, and if you get in as mayor, how would you recruit, a top professional staff for your administration?
Already doing that behind the scenes, because some of them are Democrats. They don't want to wear a scarlet letter right now until they see the outcome of the election. But many of them I'm friends with. And many of them have been great civil servants. When you're a civil servant, you're not in it for the money. You're in it for the love of what you do. These are men and women mostly. Many who are retired, who actually went to public high schools here in the city. Some who moved away, some who've remained here, because that's part of my goal. Improve, don't move. Retain what we have and retain the workers from fleeing. And they've agreed that if I become the next mayor, they will join Larry Kudlow and his economic experts. They will join Governor Pataki. They will join Bob Holden and others, Democrats for Sliwa, in helping us put together a staff of not just commissioners and deputy commissioners, but also advisors who can guide me. Because, again, I think I'm the first person ever to run for mayor to say I'm omnipotent. Not. They all act like they know. I've seen the staff does 97% of the work. You need to know that. I learned that from Melinda Katz. 97% of the work. They give them the cue cards because the elected officials are too busy on their cell phone shaking all of you down for political contributions. They get up there to the podium. They read off the cue cards. You can even tell. They don't even know what they're talking about. I'm going to allow the men and women who actually did the heavy lifting, who do all the work, to get up at the podium, to speak about something that they are passionate about, that they know in and out. And all I'm going to do is say, yep, and I'm signing off on that. Now, amazing. Give credit where credit is due. None of you would be successful in business if it was a one-man or one-woman operation. It's your staffing. It's the people who put together the programs that you need here and now and in the future. And that's what I'm going to do in City Hall. Bloomberg came closest. He delegated.
So who are some of the folks, though, that you're talking to? Can you share that with us? Like, who are the people you're considering?
Well, I already done that. Governor Pataki, who is a better governor than him? I think Democrats and Republicans can agree with that. There was no chaos. There was no corruption for 12 years. Larry Kudlow, you all know how esteemed he is. He's worked on cutting budgets, and he's also worked on cutting taxes. And Bob Holden, who is an expert on education. Now, there are others. I'll give you Assemblyman Jamie Williams was a Democrat. To give you an idea, she announced at one of our rallies against migrant shelters that she was supporting me for mayor. Oh, I think that woman has to go into the political protection program now. The Democrats are like, yeah, go ahead, Jamie. Why don't you move to Florida, right? They make lives for people who are Democrats impossible. And let's face it, the mass majority of people that would be assisting me are Democrats.
Right. She's supporting you, you mentioned, but is she actually considering working with you?
Well, no, she's an assemblywoman, and we need her, obviously, upstate to represent the constituents of an area that I grew up in, Canarsie, Brownsville, Brooklyn, those areas, Marine Park, and Mill Basin.
Thanks. You just mentioned Mayor Bloomberg. He was obviously the last Republican mayor that New York had. Would you model your approach on him, or would you differ in any notable ways?
I loved walking around the bullpen at City Hall. Michael would say, go out and get a bag of potato chips. I'd say, Michael, that has salt in it. Oh, it's okay. And I'd say, because Rudy, who I was at City Hall with, micromanaged everything. Oh, he was a micromanager. Bloomberg would say, no, talk to my commissioner, talk to my deputy commissioners. The only time I need to talk with them is if there's a problem and it's behind closed doors. There's nothing public. We try to iron out our differences. If we see things two different ways, they can go their way. I go back to what I believe is the best form of government. I would say that's what I would be doing, delegating. But also the other thing I would do is I would strengthen the Department of Investigation. Eventually, I would have an independent, autonomous group of many of these prosecutors who lost their job when Eric Adams was freed by the Department of Justice. Most of these men and women, Republicans, conservatives, Department of Integrity, so incredibly important in politics because a lot of them, Republicans and Democrats, if nobody is looking out at what they're doing, they're going to abuse the system. And I would ask them to put together an independent and autonomous agency funded. This is what the Department of Investigation chairwoman wanted, but the Eric Adams administration said no because most of the investigations would have been against his administration. The mayor should have no role in appointing people who might have to investigate him. Like Andrew Cuomo had his Moreland Commission, remember? They investigated the legislative, the judicial, and then they said, we're going to investigate you, the executive. He said, oh, no, you're not, and he shut it down and almost got indicted by Preet Bharara, a U.S. attorney for the Southern District at that time. No, mayors need to be investigated. There's good news, they always put out, but there's bad news, there needs to be transparency, and the people who pay all the bills have a right to know.
So the next question we have is from Kenny Burgos, the CEO of the New York Apartment Association. And Mr. Burgos asks, affordable housing providers face soaring insurance premiums with little city action. How would you address that?
Well, I'm going back to the Barclays Center because remember you had Ratner and he put together the greatest coalition of all time. And he had as an ally the most radical organizer of all, a woman some of you might recognize, Bertha Lewis, who ran Acorn. And their adversary was Tish James, who was not a Democrat at that time. She was elected Working Families Party, only one to run on that line as city council person. And that whole issue came up. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that I know with specificity what to do, but I am going to be convening meetings with the people who are in the industry, the people who monitor the industry, to see how, in fact, we might be able to handle that. You know, I can give you a lot of jargon. I can, give you a lot of mumbo jumbo and waste time, but that's one of the things that I would depend on the experts to deal with.
Sure.
Can we go back to, you mentioned congestion pricing a few minutes ago. you're not a fan, but we know you've met with Kathy Wild, Partnership for New York City, strong supporters of congestion pricing, as are many people in this room. The business community supports it pretty strongly. Do you acknowledge that traffic congestion is a major problem in the business district? How else would you fix it if not through congestion pricing?
Well, everything in government is a first try, as you know. They clip you for 9 now, but it's really intent to clip you for 18, and eventually it's 36. You know that. Already, there's a depleted number of Jersey residents coming in to enjoy the benefits of shopping, going to the theater or restaurant. If Jack Citarelli gets elected, and it's a close election, he is going to retaliate with a commuter tax against people leaving New York. And this is all it does. It accelerates these foolish, ridiculous taxes that do nothing for nobody except put money in the MTA, the money-taking agency that has no fiscal controls, that just keeps spending money like the federal government, like they have a printing press. No, absolutely not. And if you just walk the streets, why are all these small businesses closing? It's very apparent. I've never seen this before, except for back in the draconian days of the late 1970s, when businesses were closing and we were on the brink of fiscal insolvency. That's why I'm saying we may have to have that financial control board taken out of mothballs. I'll probably be cursing up a storm like Ed Koch was, but somebody's got to rein in the spending of government, and somebody's got to cut the taxes, and I'm the only person actually talking about that.
I didn't quite hear a plan for reducing congestion in the business district.
I would join the Trump administration and fight to eliminate that. I think it's bogus. It hasn't raised the money it said it would. $455 million to date, $1 billion of fare evasion, and we're putting money into 3 new train stations on the Q line going from 96 to 125th that nobody wants. We need capital improvement in the existing subway system. We need to employ construction business in retrofitting these enormous office buildings that will never be occupied again. I think we all realize the way you do business, you don't need to have a shingle in New York City. You don't need to lease as much square footage any longer. And so we need to move with rapid ability, give the tax abatements, give the tax breaks, put the men and women to work, and give the developers and the realtors an opportunity to transform all that empty space, which is about 50% from what I see. You go there at night, there's no lights on. It's what used to be in the South Bronx. You knew they were burned out buildings because at night there would be no lights on. And what Ed Koch did, remember how on the Cross Bronx Expressway, he put up paintings that made it appear that people lived there, with little floral arrangements on the windowsill. I don't want to go that route. I was there. I remember how bad it was, and I can see how bad it will be. It's coming down the pipe even before the Zohran flight or the Zohran sales that some of you, the pre-sales that some of you are engaged in.
So staying on transit, Mr. Sliwa, we know that outer borough residents feel underserved by slow buses, limited subway access, and rising tolls. What would you do to improve the situation for those living in the outer boroughs?
Well, first off, the express bus service, which many of your workers take because they live, is horrible. They have an app. It's never right. I've taken the express bus many times, and, I have millennial and Gen Zers who are my campaign aides who travel with me. Oh, got to go to the app, Curtis. Got to go to the app. Well, this is what it said. No, the app. 40 minutes late, 45 minutes. Sometimes they don't even come. No notification from the MTA. They clip you for 7. They're raising that to about $7.50 now with the new fare increases of the MTA. You have to put pressure on the governor, who really doesn't know about mass transit in the city, Kathy Hochul. I mean, she's from Western New York. I'm not faulting her, but that's not her expertise. And more importantly, they're putting up these lithium-ion battery warehouses. Outer boroughs, you know how many in Staten Island? 38. You know how many in Brooklyn? 12. You know how many in Queens? 8. You know how many in the Bronx? 4. You know how many in Manhattan? 0. Why is that? We have additional electricity needs because of Andrew Cuomo taking Indian Point offline and not wanting to use natural gas. You have Local 97 now, the city council, is essentially forcing condo and co-op owners out with a 30% increase in their maintenance fees because now they got to convert. Got to convert from natural gas to an electrical grid. I discussed the problems of artificial intelligence, which is going to double our electricity demands. Nobody's talking about this except for Curtis Sliwa. Have you heard Zohran talk about that? No. Have you heard Andrew Cuomo talk about that? No. Of course, he has nuclear energy stock in his portfolio. $2.5 million its evaluation. This is the guy who took Indian Point offline without a replacement.
So going back to the question, though, how would you improve transit for those in the outer boroughs?
How would I improve what?
How would you improve the transit situation for those living in the outer
Well,
boroughs?
again, the mayor has a limited capacity. You have board members on the MTA, but not substantial enough to outdo the governor and state legislative control. You got to negotiate with them. The subways you have to make safe. That's the one thing you can do, and it's got to be clean. We've got to get the homeless people in to safe shelters. I've been in a third of the 350 shelters that are run by the Department of Homeless Services, some of them MICA shelters for the mentally ill and chemically addicted. They belong in mental health care hospitals. It's Darwinian in the shelter, survival of the fittest, and that's how people end up sleeping in the subways, parks, and streets. You remember that woman, Dabrina Cuomo? None of you are candidates, Stu. December 22nd, you probably all saw her turned into a human torch in 2024 in Coney Island. She had come over from New Jersey. She had mental health issues. They sent her to an all-women shelter in the Bronx. They took everything she had. She got beaten up. Her sanctuary was the subways, and this migrant that we were putting up in a shelter in East New York, $400 a night, a pyromaniac, set her on fire, saw her twist in the wind like a melting candle. The police were doing nothing. Everybody was filming it. The migrant got away, eventually to be captured. Do you even hear anything mentioned about Dabrina Cuomo? One day, mentioned, no, we don't want to talk about that. That goes on every day in the shelter system. You make it safe, and you get the emotionally disturbed, the help that they need in the state health, mental health hospitals that they have bedding. Creedmoor, only 30% occupied. Why is Creedmoor 30% occupied? You've probably driven by Creedmoor many times. You can't miss it. There's 70% more space. A lot of it has to be retrofitted. That's how you employ contractors, developers, men and women who have trade skills. There's so much that needs to be improved without having to always want to encroach in people's neighborhoods against their will.
Okay, thank you. This is going to be the last question. You've said that you voted for President Trump. Would you push back, though, as mayor, if he, for example, deployed the National Guard to the city or threatened to freeze funds that were already awarded to New York?
The benefit of being the leader of the Guardian Angels is that I have chapters that I oversee in 13 countries and 130 cities. Many of them are the very cities that are being targeted now. Chicago, Memphis, Baltimore, Portland, all places where I would not have a problem sending National Guardsmen into certain sectors. New York City does not need it. Kathy Hochul already did it in the emergency of subway crime in 2024. Remember, she first had 750 National Guardsmen. Then when Dabrina Cuomo was burnt alive, she sent an additional 250. It's 1,000 National Guardsmen that were sent into the subway system. So I would say to the president, I would say to his attachés and aides who know New York City, there's no need here. Other places, oh yeah, you can make the case for that. Washington, D.C. was proof positive. But we really don't need it here. What we could use is Kash Patel and the FBI investigating the sex trafficking that brings women in from Asia, Central and South America, and you've seen them in Corona, East Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, Flushing, actually selling their bodies in the streets. Do you think that would be permitted on Sutton Place? Do you think that would be permitted on Park Avenue? Do you think that would be permitted on Billionaires Row? Of course not. These are absentee landlords. They live in Delray and other parts unknown. They need to be cited. Those buildings need to be taken over. They're madams and pimps. They need to be arrested. The Johns need to be shamed. And we need to give help to these women who are being used and have been brought here sometimes nefariously, and see if they want to go back to their country of origin or get the help that they desperately deserve. But nobody is dealing with that. As mayor, I know where all the bones are buried in these neighborhoods of problems that exists. And I would tell the administration we could use Kash Patel and the FBI to track the narco-terrorists and the sex traffickers who are aiding and abetting this business that is destroying neighborhoods and destroying the women.
Thank you very much, Mr. Curtis Sliwa. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Just leave it right here. Okay. We have one more candidate. Our next speaker is Andrew Cuomo, who served as governor of New York from 2011 to 2021, after terms as state attorney general and the U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Please welcome Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Good morning. You all look a little fatigued. I can understand why. Curtis tired you out. Thank you very much for having me for this important forum. New York is at a crossroads. I think we all understand that. And the stakes are very high. I think we're either going to see the city decline dramatically or pivot and actually see a rebirth. Major economic forces shaped the development of our nation's great cities in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and major forces are now shifting the urban landscape once again. COVID was transformative in many ways. Greater flexibility makes place-based strategies less important. Step one is to acknowledge and stabilize the situation, maximize people back in offices, and slow and even reverse the exodus. I don't believe anyone really wants to live in Florida. 5 days, 6 days, then they want back. Public safety is still job one. I would hire 5,000 police officers, post 1,500 in the subways. That would bring the force back to where it was under Mayor Dinkins and Giuliani. Make New Yorkers feel safe. That's job one. Quality public education. You want to keep young families in the city? The reason they leave is the public education system, because they're not going to sacrifice their children. It would be a serious mistake to roll back mayoral control. Eliminating the gifted and talented programs would also be a mistake. That's the one hope many families have. I would actually do the opposite. I would increase the gifted and talented programs, and I would double the number of specialized high schools. Step two is to look in the mirror. There are not many farms in New York City. We are a financial and commercial capital. We are a regulated capitalist economy. We are not socialists. We all saw the foreshadowing of the danger of this philosophy when we lost the Amazon project in Queens and 50,000 jobs due to socialist opposition. Corporate tax incentives in the highest tax city in the country is a mortal sin. My opponent's proposal to provide free everything funded by raising taxes is pure ideological fantasy. A 13% income tax would create an express airline to Florida. His proposal would not equalize corporate taxes with New Jersey, as he claims. New Jersey only has a state corporate tax. New York has a state corporate tax and a city corporate tax and an MTA tax as well. So his proposal would actually double New York's rate compared to New Jersey, roughly 11% to 24%. Do you think that corporations can swim across the Hudson? Because they're going to try. And his program would require all city funding, because his state funding proposal would never materialize. The state cannot raise taxes on corporations all throughout the state on the condition that the revenue raised goes only to New York City. A Buffalo legislator cannot vote to increase taxes on Buffalo corporations, but the revenue is going to go to New York City. The Buffalo legislator may be willing to send snow to New York City, but not cash, I promise you. I believe we should be lowering taxes. I would eliminate taxes on tips and overtime aligned with the federal government. I'd institute a 2% property tax cap on homeowners and eliminate income taxes for those making 200% of FPL. The so-called freeze the rent proposal is also fatally flawed. It would freeze only the rent stabilized units, which are about 25% of all units, while 75% would pay the increase. And the 25% are not means tested. So you would have many wealthy people living in those 25% who would just gain a windfall. It is not a new idea. It is a recycled de Blasio proposal. And you know my desire to recycle Bill de Blasio. But the proposal didn't work then, and it's not going to work now. We need 500,000 units of affordable housing because the rents are too damn high. And the fundamental problem is supply and demand, and we don't have supply. We have about a 1 3/4% vacancy rate. So supply and demand just doesn't work. We have to create units. B and C office conversions must be accelerated with feasible incentives that make it worthwhile for the landlord to do it. 485X might be a great name for a rocket ship, but it's not working as an affordable housing program. 421A was working. Sunnyside Yards is a possibility, but there are many train depots that could use platforms to build housing and also protect the trains. We should rezone industrial development zones where appropriate. There are at least 25,000 vacant rent-stabilized units. We should subsidize the landlords to put them back online. NYCHA as well. Repair those units, get them online. At HUD, I used to tell mayors that cities are either growing or they are dying. We must be pro-growth and we must be aggressive. I believe in large-scale infrastructure projects, as they not only improve functionality, but they provide optimism. LaGuardia Airport is a symbol of possibility. When you walk through that airport, you just feel good about New York and what New York can do. The Mario Cuomo Bridge, the new terminals at Kennedy, they are inspirational. And they suggest, yes, maybe New York does have a future. I believe the Interborough Express deserves serious consideration. I believe the MTA $5 billion capital plan for the New York City Transit Authority poses great potential if we find a way to manage those capital projects. I made the 2nd Avenue subway work. I made Moynihan Train Hall work. I made the L train tunnel happen, all by personal intervention. The governor is not supposed to be the general contractor for the MTA. That is not the way it is supposed to work. We have to get these projects on time, on budget, And the city is going to have to play a bigger role in making that happen. We should try to attract worldwide events, Super Bowls, playoffs, World Series, international conventions at our expanded Jacob Javits Center. Formula One races, they're very big. I'll drive. The point is to get creative on tourism and bringing people into our city. And let's make a major start by stopping a major debacle, which is the new jail construction to replace Rikers Island. The writing is on the wall. It promises to be New York City's big ditch. It is already years late, billions over budget, and obsolete. We should rebuild new state-of-the-art jails on Rikers Island, provide free bus service, and use those existing sites for housing and commercial development. It's a great opportunity to start out of the box. In sum, I believe New York City can set an example for post-COVID urban areas. Los Angeles, Chicago, Portland, even London are all suffering. Carpe diem. New Yorkers are a special breed. We have an indomitable spirit of renewal and an irrepressible strength of resilience. We rise again, again, and again. We are fueled by new immigrants and their energy. Our vantage point is where competence and confidence meet imagination and daring. Now is the moment for New York City to regain the crown as the greatest city on the globe. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Great. Well, thank you very much. And we're looking forward to this conversation.
Hi, Governor. Thanks for being here. I think you just made some news with this, saying you would like to rebuild Rikers Island, so we should talk more about that in a bit. But first, we wanted to ask about Albany. As you mentioned in your remarks, you have said Assemblymember Mamdani will have a difficult time getting his agenda through Albany, but you have your own history of strained relationships with legislative leaders and with Governor Hochul. Would you need to mend fences before you make any major asks?
I don't have to mend fences. I have a good relationship. One second. I don't have to mend fences. I have a good relationship with the governor. I know the legislative leaders for years. To think that you are going to get through a budget without tension means you've never done a budget in Albany. That I can promise you. I did 11 budgets. Each one on time, set a record in modern political history. Passed more national groundbreaking laws than any governor in modern political history. But none of it is easy. None of it is easy. There is a different dynamic now, and I've been watching the Albany-City relationship since Koch and my father. Giuliani Pataki, right? I had Mayor Bloomberg. I had Mayor de Blasio. It's different today. The executives are less powerful. The legislative leaders are less powerful. You know, in the old days, you had a conversation with Peter Vallone. That was it. Peter Vallone got it done. You had a conversation with Sheldon Silver. That was it. It was one conversation. It was done. Now, to move the legislature, you have to move the body, the collective body. So the approach has to be presenting a case to the public that moves the legislative body. That is actually easier done than having to deal with one executive or one leader.
So the next question comes from Catherine Wild, the president and CEO of the Partnership for New York City, who I'm sure you know well. And Kathy writes, the financial sector, 20% of New York City's economy, is shrinking here while growing in Texas and Florida. How would you keep jobs and growth in New York?
Oh, that's an easy one. Beg. look, we have to change the fundamental dynamic. We have a hangover New York arrogance. The hangover New York arrogance is we assume there is no place else for you to go. It's that old New Yorker magazine, right? It's only the East Coast. There's New York and there's nothing to the West. There are actually other states out there, you know, and you can theoretically move there. And more and more it is happening. And we have this attitude, and we still have this attitude. Well, we can raise taxes, nobody will really leave. We can be difficult on regulations, nobody will really leave. We can be impossible to deal with, and nobody will really leave. Our regulatory environment can be bizarre, nobody will really leave. They've left. They are leaving. So you have to change the attitude 180 degrees, and you have to start to attract them back. You have to say, first of all, I get it, and I want to partner with you. Come back, I'll offer you incentives, we'll do startup capital, let me help you find a space, let me help you find land. I did that as governor. I was like the chief marketing officer. I went around the world and said to corporations, come back with me, I'll find whatever you need. But it's a total shift in attitude. Business is not the enemy, business is the engine. And we are going to have to work very hard to incentivize them to come back here because it is expensive and it is difficult. And the quality of life is not what it was. And now you're asking me to pay a premium to live here in New York City taxes, and what am I getting for it? That's the question that we have to answer. And I think it's a total mind shift and then literally a totally different governmental approach where we are now extending our hand to businesses to help them come here, locate here, let's get AI here, let's do university partnerships here. That's what it's going to take.
Thank you. Another governing question. You've distanced yourself from some of the more progressive laws that you signed toward the end of your governorship, like the 2019 rent reforms. But as mayor, you would need to deal with a very progressive city council, just like the progressive state legislature you had to deal with. So why would the business community believe that you can block progressive legislation at the city level if you couldn't at the state level?
Well, at the end, I had a supermajority, which means they could override me. So now you have a difficult choice as governor. Either negotiate with them and get the best bill that you can, or tell them, pass whatever you want, I'll veto it, and they'll override. The politically easier decision is let them pass whatever they want, you veto it, they then override, and then I could sit here and say to you, oh yeah, I didn't do that. They overrode my veto. That is the politically expedient answer. It is the wrong governmental answer. The right governmental answer is negotiate the best bill you can, get the worst things out of it, but do the best you can to get the bill palatable. Which is what I did. Now, dealing with the New York State Legislature, dealing with 240 people. New York City Council is 50 people. That is a very big difference in my book, because 240 people, that's a lot of lunches and dinners and glasses of wine. I'm still a little hungover. Dealing with a body of 50 people, by definition, is going to be easier. But it's legislative relations. I did it in Washington when I was HUD secretary and had to pass a budget with Congress. You know, it's interpersonal, it's one-on-one, it's developing coalitions.
Do you have relationships currently with any members of the city council?
I have relationships with members of the city council, yes.
Name a couple.
I don't want to put them on the spot right now.
Let's switch gears to housing and property taxes. Kenny Burgess, the CEO of the New York Apartment Association, says previous mayors have spoken at length about the city's unjust property tax system, but nobody has done anything to fix it. What are you going to do differently?
Yeah. The city property tax system is totally unfair, unjust, and illegal. Other than that, it's a great system. You know, just get past those hurdles. There's a case, the Tenney case. Sometimes legal action can help government do what government finds difficult to do, okay? The problem with property tax reform is you're going to have winners and you're going to have losers. And the political system does not like having losers. That's why no one wanted to go near it, right? The legal case can actually be used, frankly, as a facilitating device to say, we have to do this. It is illegal. The court said it must be changed. And then you can come up with a mechanism that gives the council deniability, right? At one time, we had to close hospitals, and nobody wants to close hospitals in any community. And we set up a commission, and the commission decided what hospitals should close, and then everybody blamed the commission. And there were no elected officials on the commission, so they didn't really care, and it actually got done. But I could see this happening sort of that way. Court says you must do it. Okay, we're going to take this table right here. You're experts. Here's the court ruling. Go figure out the plan. And then you bring it back, and that's the recommendation. That's the law. And it shields the elected officials from having to make a difficult decision. That's why nothing has happened.
So you would tell the city's lawyers to stop defending the current system in court?
I think you're going to lose anyway.
Okay. Shifting gears to mental health, you're campaigning pretty heavily on getting homeless, mentally ill people off the street, but a lot of your proposals would rely on pretty similar tactics to what Mayor Adams has already used, like involuntary hospitalizations, building more supportive housing. So why would your efforts succeed when the current mayor hasn't had much, at least visible
success? Me, this is I do not get this. I started in my 20s building housing for the homeless. I ran a youngest commissioner for Mayor David Dinkins to run a commission on homelessness that did a plan for the city. I then did homelessness nationwide for Bill Clinton, and we did a plan. Worked in virtually all the big cities on homelessness and mentally ill. The law is so clear, especially in New York. You just have to be willing to exercise the law. If a person is mentally ill, you are doing them no favor leaving them on the streets. I think there's a political attitude that is like, well, we want to protect their civil rights, their civil liberties. Bringing them in involuntarily is a civil rights violation. Not if they're mentally ill. The law says if you are not in a position to care for yourself, if you are putting yourself in a dangerous situation, sleeping on a subway in a corner where you could get mugged or robbed, you are putting yourself in a situation where you cannot care for yourself. That person should get medical assistance and mental health assistance. And are there going to be advocates who yell? Yes. But by the way, there are going to be advocates that yell no matter what you do. So do the right thing.
But I'm sorry, the current mayor has said pretty much everything you just said, and it doesn't seem like, at least visibly, the problem has gone away. So what would you do differently? Yeah,
but because the difference is in the doing, right? Everything is simple in concept. I'm a stock trader. Buy low, sell high. Got it. That's great. Simple formula. I'll do it. I can make $1 million. I know, but the art form is in the doing. Government, the art form is in the capacity and the qualifications and the experience to get it done, to make those agencies work together, to make those gears mesh, to deal with the political opposition, to take the slings and arrows, to get sued, to have them protest in front of your house. That's the art form. The art form is the doing.
So moving on, and you mentioned this in your prepared remarks about kind of a big project vision, and as governor, you championed major infrastructure projects. It'd be great if you could inspire us all here and tell us what is a big project that you would pursue as mayor of New York City?
I think the big project is not going to be the LaGuardia, Moynihan, Kennedy model. The big project has to be 500,000 units of affordable housing on 300 sites simultaneously. I think that's the first big project, which in some ways is harder than a LaGuardia airport or Second Avenue subway, or I also did all the airports upstate. But that's what it's going to be. It's going to be 500,000 units, 300 sites, all managed simultaneously, getting those agencies to do the approvals, identifying possible locations, making partnerships, putting together financial packages, because that is the initial crisis. Affordable housing is a crisis because it will stop the young people from coming. And the young people from coming is everything. That is the talent. Those are the little fish, and then the corporations and the tech corporations are the big fish that come in to feed on the little fish. They come here for our talent, and we have to keep bringing the talent, and that's affordable housing. And that would be the top capital project.
Yeah, and what are your plans? So how would you get that done? Specifically, what needs to be done to see that through fruition?
It has to be the mayor's #1 job. Mayor personally, and the #1 job. Working everything through, identify every possible site, all the financing projects, dealing with the city council, dealing with the communities, getting the approvals, dealing with the labor unions, and getting everybody to yes in a realistic time frame. You know, it can't be the Brooklyn Marine Terminal. It's going to take us 4 years to plan, right? Those time frames don't work. This is going to have to happen very, very quickly.
Yep. Next question is from Jim Whalen at Rebney. How would you sustain momentum in the commercial office sector?
Look, the A buildings are doing well, God bless them. B and C, I think, are going to continue to struggle. I think we can do everything we can to try to increase the number of people coming back to offices. I don't think we're ever going to get to where we were. I think we have to deal with that reality and the financial consequences of that reality. And I am still bullish. I know all the obstacles, but I am still bullish on conversion of those B and Cs to residential, either with that building, with incentives, or take the building down and use the site. We need the residentials. And we're just kicking the ball down the field, hoping that occupancy is going to come back and fill those B and Cs. I don't see it happening.
Could we go back to housing for a second? You talked about 500,000 units being built, but you've also said that you would basically spare low-density neighborhoods from future upzoning. So where do those units get built, if not?
No, I said you have to take the characteristics of a neighborhood into consideration.
I think the housing plan says you would avoid future rezonings in low-density neighborhoods with some limited exceptions.
Well, yeah, that's the whole, limited exceptions qualifies everything, right? So you have to take into, I get this political sensitivity and I get the city of yes and what everybody went through, but it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. And all of it is going to be hard, by the way. The reason none of this happens is because it is all fraught with peril, right? Quick side story, Tappan Zee Bridge. 40 years, they said they were going to replace the Tappan Zee Bridge. I just become governor, I'm a new governor, I'm all excited. I said, what can we do that's really big? They said, well, you can say you would replace the Tappan Zee Bridge. I said, what does that mean? I can say I would replace it. They said, well, you can say you're going to replace it. Everybody says they're going to replace it, but you can't actually replace it. I said, why not? They said, oh, it's over the Hudson River. You're going to get sued if you drop a hammer into the water. The Hudson River keeper is going to come put you in jail. So you can't really do it, but you can say you're going to do it. We did it, right? This is going to be hard. And I understand the sensitivity after City of Yes, but you're not going to get it done otherwise.
So we have another question, Governor, from Danny Meyer, a restaurateur and founder of the Union Square Hospitality Group. Not surprisingly, it's about restaurants. And he says, restaurants are among New York City's largest employers and central to its appeal. What will you do to support the health of that industry?
More Italian restaurants. I believe we have a shortage of Italian restaurants in this city, and I think it's hurting the overall economy. And I think Danny Myers is at the top of that list, by the way. Look, tourism, restaurants, that is a very big part of the economy. As I mentioned, we expanded the Jacob Javits Center. It's now a world-class convention center. So we have all the goods to attract tourism. A safe city, an affordable city are the first two steps. And then more aggressive marketing of the city, right? Especially around these large special events where I think we can do a better job. I don't think we've been aggressive enough in reaching out to them.
So coming back to we've asked this question to all the candidates. I think it originated with Kathy Wild at the Partnership for New York City, but that time period between election inauguration, what resources will you use to recruit a top professional staff in that time?
Charm and personality. I think there's going to be a lot of people who want to come into government. I think we're in a different phase. We were in a phase where you couldn't get anyone to come into government. And you have to remember, I cover a long span, right? Everybody wanted to be in a hedge fund, and I'm going to Wall Street, I'm going to make a lot of money, and I'm going to have a Maserati and a house in the Hamptons. I think people are genuinely afraid of what's happening in New York City. I think there's a lot of talent and a lot of young people who want to be part of something and do something big and do something good. So I think recruiting new talent is going to be easier than it has been in the past. And remember, I dealt with this for 12 years as governor, 11 years, 4 years as attorney general, 8 years as HUD secretary. You want to see a challenge, try getting someone to move to Washington to work at HUD. HUD, the HUD building, Jack Kemp, God rest his soul, described it as 14 floors of basement. It's all poured cement, the HUD building. Feels like you're walking into a maximum security prison. But I think it's going to be easier to get young talent.
You don't have a reputation of being an easy person to work for necessarily. Have you changed your management style at all?
No, I just work with fewer people. I'll hire you, you go be nice to them, I'll get stuff done. No, look, I get the reputational thing. The people who have worked for me, you won't find an elected official who has had people work for them for a longer period of time than I have. I have people who worked with me literally for 30 years. From HUD, I have staff. From the Attorney General's office, and then 11 years as governor. People who stayed 10, 15 years. That never happens. Normally they're in 2 years, they're out, and they're out selling. So no, I have a very, very loyal team of people. Do we work hard? Yes. Actually, it's the team dynamic. The team really considers themselves special. And if you are not up to that, you know what? We'll put you on another team. But they don't want you on their team, which is what really is the driving factor. But as I said, no, I have a very, very loyal, talented group that could be doing anything anywhere else for 10 times the money. And they've stuck with me for many years because we get stuff done and it's rewarding.
But circling back on something that Nick asked, because I think it's important, how have you changed your management style over the last few years, if you have?
Well, look, I think at times I pushed harder than I need to push. You know, from the outside, it's easy to say, well, you can get everything done and make everyone happy. That is not true. You don't get 11 budgets passed on time and everybody's happy. You don't pass marriage equality that just went down the year before with everybody happy. You don't step in and finish the 2nd Avenue subway or the L train tunnel where the MTA wanted to sue me, or COVID, where Donald Trump was trying to put me in jail every day. You know, these are fraught situations. But were there times when I pushed harder than I needed to? Yes. Yes, I believe that upon reflection.
Thanks. This next question is from Christine Quinn, the president and CEO of WIN. About 1 million New Yorkers rely on public or subsidized housing, but production of deeply affordable units is lagging. How would you incentivize developers to build more for the lowest income households?
You have to pay. I was HUD secretary. There used to be something called low-income housing. Remember low-income housing? Nobody calls it, there is no low-income housing. It's now affordable housing. We do affordable housing. But we don't do low-income housing. Low-income housing is no-income housing, right? Public housing is no-income housing. That is very, very, very expensive. And that's why we don't do it. Affordable housing, easier to cite. They're working families, they're intact families, not as expensive. The public housing, low income, no income, that's much, much more expensive, much deeper subsidy for a much longer period of time.
So the next question we have is from Andrew Rigi, the president of the New York Hospitality Alliance. And Andrew writes, you've proposed to raise the minimum tax wage to $20. Minimum wage, I'm sorry. What do you say to small business owners who insist they cannot afford a $20 to $30 minimum wage, especially since the minimum wage is already scheduled to increase again and then is set to increase annually with inflation?
Yeah, I say I raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour, which is the highest in the United States of America. Business owners said, oh, this is going to be terrible. It's going to hurt business. We're going to have to fire employees. The exact opposite happened. We phased it in, and we have a carve-out for small businesses. So if you're a small business, we actually have a carve-out for the provision and a longer-term phase-in. It's about $17. We would go to 20 over 2 years. I think it is very manageable. And you cannot live on $17 an hour. And everybody wants to talk about the affordability crisis. I can't pay my rent, I can't pay for food. And by the way, we have a food subsidy program. I would do free bus and train for working families because we shouldn't subsidize people who can pay the fare. But yes, we have an affordability crisis. And you can't do it at $17 an hour. By the way, you can't even do it at $20 an hour. But at least it's a start and it's better.
This might be our final question, just very specific. It's about red tape. Can you name one specific regulation at any city agency that you consider to be unnecessary red tape that you would cut?
I think, look, you're going to start with a deficit from the beginning. I came into state government, I had a $10 billion deficit, largest deficit in the history of the state of New York. And we started to have a conversation about, well, how do we find 10 billion? And we started top down. I said, we can't do it this way. We're going to go bottom up, redesign the whole damn government, redesign the agencies, start with a blank piece of paper. You're going to have to do that in this city. The last time it was done was 12 years ago with Mike Bloomberg, where he really had a rigorous management review of what those agencies do and why they do them. Red tape layers. They're all good ideas. Every legislative session, I have a good idea, and here's another regulation layered on top of the other regulation. It's like coats of paint on a wall. They just build up. And at one point you have to go with a scalpel and you have to actually peel off all those different paints. We're there in this city government. These agencies don't work. They don't work well, they don't work quickly, and for especially the primary ones, I would start with a blank piece of paper and rewrite from the bottom up.
Can you name one that already exists? That you
HPD, well, I would start with the housing agencies because that has to be job one.
Great. Thank you, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, for being here today.
Thank you very much.